paper. Okay, give me just a minute.
Yeah, take that.
Hey, how you doing? Good to see you.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the April 21st, 2021 Prince Edward County Planning Commission meeting tonight. We are glad that you're here. Chairman Pringwin cannot be here tonight, so I'm going to try to fill his big shoes and get through the meeting as best I can. So we'll start the meeting by calling the meeting to order. And our first item of business is approval of the minutes of the last meeting. Hope everyone's had a chance to look at those.
Unless somebody has an addition or correction, I'd like to make a motion we approve them as mailed.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. All in favor of approving the meeting, the minutes from the last meeting, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Our first item on the agenda tonight is a public hearing. It's a special use permit for Israel Yoder. And Rob, would you like to
Yes, sir.
brief us on that?
Rob, may I say I need to recuse myself because I am an adjoining property owner?
Okay. The county has received an application for a special use permit from Israel Yoder, doing business as Country Corner Dairy, to operate a grade M milk processing facility to produce varieties of cheese with a retail store on site on tax map number 073-A-9 on County Line Road, Cullen, Virginia. The application is in your packet. The parcel is zoned A1 agricultural conservation, and this use would only be approved after a special use permit is granted. This was duly advertised in the Farmville Herald on April 9th and 14th. Property owner notification letters were sent to the adjoiners as well as the adjoining locality, since this is a application within a half mile of the county border with Charlotte County. I've had no comments for or against this application, either by residents or the adjoining county. And the applicant is here tonight. They can answer any questions. I have prepared staff recommended potential conditions in your table pack for your consideration. I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have. There is a site plan that's with this and a notation of the summary of what the operation is about.
Okay.
One other thing I would note, I did have, I think I emailed you more information. VDH, of the Health Department, has no issues with this. Of course, it will need several regulatory bodies' approval, VDAX, VDH approval, so that would have to occur after any local approval by the county.
Okay. Mr. Yoder, would you like to come up and say a few words about what you propose to do?
Well,
Or add anything to what's already been said?
we kind of put on paper, I think you have a copy of that on what we have in mind.
Okay. I did have one question about the hours of operation. You said normal business hours. Do you have kind of an idea what hours we're talking about during the day?
8 to 4.
8 to 4? Okay. Okay. All right. Does anybody else have any questions for them?
I have one question. The grade M milk processing, is that just producing the cheeses and all of that?
The grade M is like a manufacturing grade.
Right.
Grade A would be to process.
Fluid.
Fluid milk.
Yeah.
Grade M would be to process like cheese and that kind
Okay, thank you.
I'm sure they'll be regulated by the state in a lot of ways, no doubt. They, because they obviously come out to any dairy producing facility like mine or the Jenkinses and keep up with it. And I know some other, I think they might be one of the few cheese processors, but some of the other milk and ice cream processing plants have done very well and are a good asset to the community. And I think theirs would be too.
The other 4 farmers, are they local to y'all in the general area right there? Okay.
We need to read them. Are there any other questions? For Mr. Yoder? We appreciate so much y'all coming tonight and everything. Should we talk about the potential conditions now?
Sure, that's fine.
Staff has recommended, I hope y'all have had a chance to look at them, some potential conditions. So I'll read through those real quick for you. For the site plan, development activities on the site shall be limited to those as specified in the special use permit application and site plan. The final locations of incidental facilities may be adjusted provided no such adjustment violates any buffers, setbacks, or other statutory requirements. The concept reflected in the filed special use permit dated 3/23/2021 are hereby made part of these development conditions. Final site approval for the milk processing facility shall be submitted to the Prince Edward County Planning Commission for final review and approval pursuant to Article 4 Development Standards of the Prince Edward County Zoning Code or zoning ordinance. Any proposed expansion of the operation, change of activities, or additional facilities or activities shall be submitted to the Prince Edward County Planning and Community Development Office for review prior to implementation. Any changes may be subject to permit amendment procedures, including public hearings. All buildings within the property shall be developed as a cohesive entity, ensuring that building placement, architectural treatment, parking lot lighting, landscaping, trash disposal, vehicular and pedestrian circulation, and other development elements work together functionally and aesthetically. All landscaping shall be mulched and maintained to the reasonable satisfaction of the Prince Edward County Planning and Community Development Director. Any vegetation found to be of poor condition shall be replaced or improved at the reasonable direction of the Planning and Community Development Director or his designee. Environmental considerations, all pollution control measures, erosion and sediment control measures, stormwater control facilities, and all construction activities shall comply with the requirements of the appropriate federal, state, and local regulations and ordinances. All facilities for the provision of potable water and sanitation and wastewater disposal systems shall be approved by the appropriate local, state, or federal agency, including but not limited to Virginia Department of Health, the Virginia Departments of Environmental Quality, Environmental Protection Agency, etc. Any development activities of structural land disturbance nature not specifically addressed by these conditions shall be in conformance with applicable provisions of federal, state, local statutes and regulations. All entrance permits must be authorized by the Virginia Department of Transportation. All internal roads used for public access shall be of compacted earth or have a minimum of 4-inch stone base or shall be paved. Adequate area shall be provided on-site to accommodate parking of all employees and patrons. It shall be the responsibility of the permittee to assure that employees and patrons park only on-site and not on any highway right-of-way or on adjoining or adjacent parcels unless written consent is provided by the owner or owners thereof. All exterior lighting shall be designed, installed so as to minimize glare onto adjoining properties or any public access road. All lighting shall be full cut off type fixtures. Outdoor storage of trash containers shall be situated at the rear of the buildings and shall be appropriately screened. The permittee is responsible for the appearance of the site, including litter pickup and other orderly site appearance. This permit is non-transferable except and unless written notice from the permittee regarding the transfer and a signed document from the proposed new permittee is received by the Planning and Community Development Office, which states that the new permittee agrees to comply with all terms and conditions imposed with the original permit issuance. It must be addressed by the Prince Edward County Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors through the special use permit process. Failure of permittee to full conform to all terms and conditions may result in revocation of the special use permit if said failure or failures are not corrected or addressed to the satisfaction not to be unreasonably withheld of the county within 30 days of written notice from the county. So,
No, I
Mr.
mean, I think that's a pretty good summarization of what we need to implement as far as these issues, but I'm sure they'll do a good job of it and keep things
Yeah.
right.
Well, if we don't have any more questions for them, or they have questions for us, I will close the public hearing. Oh, we don't have anybody on the phone, so.
That's right.
Nobody's called in, by the way. So I will close the public hearing part of the meeting. And is there any discussion among the commission members about this?
If no discussion, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the special use permit for the cheese plant and wish them the best of luck.
Absolutely. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. It's been seconded.
That includes the conditions as? as-
With the
including
conditions.
Yeah, yeah, and state, yeah.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? So passed. Thank you, Mr. Yoder. We appreciate y'all coming tonight, and good luck with your business adventure.
Thank you.
Now, for y'all's benefit, we will have a another public hearing in front of the Board of Supervisors. This was a recommendation only. The final vote is by the Board of Supervisors to approve or deny an application. So I'll be sending you that information. That'll be at their May meeting.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is a public hearing for the Prince Edward CSG LLC Community Solar Facility. And Rob, you want to
Yes, sir.
talk to us about that?
The first step in this is to do a 2232 review, and I'll go over what that's about. Pursuant to Virginia Code Section 15.2-2232, when a locality receives an application, the Planning Commission shall review all proposed developments that include the term public utility facility prior to construction or authorization of the facility. The public hearing is to determine whether the location, character, and extent of the facility is in substantial accord with the comprehensive plan prior to any approval of a special use permit. This was properly advertised in the April 9th and April 14th edition of the Farmville Herald. I did send adjoining localities, which is, since this application is within a half a mile of the border, to Appomattox and Charlotte counties, and you have that letter in your packet. I did note in your package of information our comprehensive plan citations as they pertain to this type of facility. I won't read those to you. Just of note that this property consists of a mixture of cleared and timber land, and the prior use being that of agricultural, and there is a single-family residential structure on site. It is bordered by agricultural land, pasture and timber, with a few sparse single-family homes. The property is zoned A1 and adjacent to Thomas Jefferson Highway, which again is a scenic byway. This property is shown as agricultural and forest on the future land use plan. And I'll be glad to answer any questions that you all may have. The purpose of this, again, is to determine whether this meets the, or is in substantial accord with the comprehensive plan and promotes the goals, objectives, and strategies as noted in the plan.
Okay. Are there any questions for Rob about this, or any discussion?
Yeah, I drove up through there the other day, and the railroad's on the backside of this property, right?
That's right.
And it gets kind of narrow there in some ends of it, right?
Yes.
And I was wondering how they were going to buffer it as far as road frontage, because,
They've got on the site plan I've got over there on the easel, they've got two different options. They've got the 50-foot setback with a 15-foot landscape buffer. That meets our ordinance. They've also have a 100-foot setback line noted that's an optional item, should you choose to increase that. That would occur during the special use permit at the second hearing tonight.
okay, all
Just
right,
so-
all right, yeah, maybe that's where I didn't see that in there.
Yeah, I'll address that a little more in that. I'll address those specifics a little more in the next hearing.
Okay, are they on the phone by chance?
Yes, they are.
Okay, they are?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, they have a Zoom meeting prepared for the special use permit.
Okay, because I was just curious about that too. I just wondered about how much I was gonna limit with the railroad track on the back. Will they have to buffer the railroad track side too?
Yes.
It is. I think we're fortunate right now that there is some landscape, some vegetation along the railroad. But there's no guarantee down the road that the railroad could come in and cut all that down, so.
It's on the railroads right away that vegetation is. Well, they need to be responsible on their property to do
That's
that.
right.
And one of your strategies is on the second page of the land use objectives, strategy number 1, which is on page 95 of the comprehensive plan, is to utilize well-planned site designs and effective buffer areas to mitigate the impacts of adjacent land uses. So that's something that you might want to consider in the special use permit. But like I said, again, I brought out points that pertain to this particular application. But
They will be leasing this land from the owner or buying.
That's in your table pack. It's, my understanding it's a lease.
Okay, I didn't see that. Oh, okay, rent, all right, I'm sorry. I missed that. And obviously, if it ever did get approved, we will make them be bonded.
Yes.
Yeah, like we've discussed before, yeah.
Okay, any other questions for Rob about this? Okay, we need to, have a motion, that this, special use permit application, is substantially in accord with the Prince Edward County Comprehensive Plan and promotes the goals, objectives, and strategies noted in the plan. Motion for or against, or we can table it to another date, later date, if you so desire. So do I hear a motion on the floor?
Well, for discussion purposes, I'll make a motion to go ahead and approve it.
Okay. Is there a second?
second.
Okay. Motion on the floor and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, so passed. So
Okay.
we'll move along to the public hearing for the special use permit for the community solar facility.
Yes.
Rob?
Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, this public hearing is to consider the special use permit for the community solar facility filed by Prince Edward CSG LLC to operate a 5.1 megawatt DC, 4.0 megawatt AC community solar generation facility on tax map number 057A 11 with an address of 14100 Thomas Jefferson Highway, Pamplin, Virginia. The parcel is zoned A1 agricultural zoning district, and this use is only allowed after a special use permit is issued. This hearing was properly advertised in the April 9th and 14th editions of the Farmville Herald. Joining property owners and sample letters were sent to property owners as well as surrounding localities of Charlotte and Appomattox. The purpose of this use is to allow for the location of a community solar generation facility. The applicant stated that the proposed facility will not be seen nor heard and will not impact adjacent properties. The facility will not generate noise, light, dust, odor, fumes, or vibration. Water quality will be addressed according to the Virginia Stormwater Management permit requirements, which I want to note that Prince Edward County manages its own program. So we would receive the applications for stormwater and have them reviewed by our engineer. Only approved after those plans are signed off on by our consultant. The site will not generate any significant amount of traffic long-term, but it will have some traffic temporarily during the construction phase. Staff does not note any major concerns or negative impacts on surrounding properties, but recommends the consideration of additional buffering due to the fact that Thomas Jefferson Highway is designated as a scenic byway. The applicant is here and I think wants to we'll have a Zoom presentation by them. I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have. To note what in their site plan, which I have on the easel, the plan as offered is a 50-foot buffer with a 50-foot setback with a 15-foot vegetative buffer. And that meets the minimum ordinance standards. Of course, you all can approve or recommend to the Board of Supervisors something larger or the same.
Any questions for Rob?
I guess they can answer this, but roughly, it looks like to me about half this land will have to be forested. Yeah, and obviously, they'd have to go through the rules and regulations of the forestry department, because I expect that land probably rolls pretty good in there in some spots. What would need to be left and
Yeah,
what could be harvested.
I think I would ask that part of them after their presentation.
Okay.
I think.
Okay. We have the applicant to. Just,
Hi, good evening, everybody. Can everybody hear and see me?
Yes.
yes, yes.
Okay,
Thank
great,
you for
good
being
evening.
here.
Absolutely, thank you for having us. We really appreciate
Virtually,
everybody the time tonight. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Let me know when everybody can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. Well, again, thank you for taking the time tonight. My name is Kieran Cial. I'm the Director of Development for Dimension Energy. We're doing business tonight as Prince Edward CSG LLC, and we're proposing our Prince Edward CSG LLC community solar facility. On the line with me tonight, I have a couple folks who will help with the presentation. We have Daniel Langston from Christopher Consulting. Daniel is our landscape architect, and Christopher Consulting is our civil engineer. We also have Ben Rosner from WSSI. WSSI is our environmental consultant. And finally, we have Fletcher Mangum from Mangum Economics, who is our economic consultant. And we're really glad to be here tonight and tell you about the project. All right, so just an overview of our presentation tonight. First, we'll be doing an introduction about our company, Dimension Energy. Next, we'll give an overview of Virginia's community solar program. What is community solar? Why is it happening in Virginia now? And then we will talk about community solar and how it's different than utility scale solar, which I think is a class of solar project that the area is more familiar with. There have been other projects proposed either within the county or in neighboring counties. And then we'll do an overview of this particular project site and why we think this makes sense at this location. And then finally, open the floor to questions from both the Planning Commission and the public. So at a high level, as I mentioned, Dimension Energy is a community solar and energy storage developer. We're headquartered out of Atlanta, and I lead our market for Virginia. Dimension comes from a deep bench of experience between our management team, our executive team, and our board of directors. Our folks have developed, constructed, financed around 1 gigawatt of solar projects over the past handful of years. We've currently raised $4 billion of project finance, and we currently have around 500 megawatts. So that's half a gigawatt of solar projects in our current portfolio, which we're actively developing in states not only like Virginia, but other mature and early stage markets across the country, like New York, California, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Maine. And over the next 4 years, we expect to develop around 800 megawatts of projects. Won't spend too much time here. This is just a figure showing our head count and our reach across the country. As I mentioned, we're headquartered out of Atlanta. We have regional offices in New York and San Francisco, some other employees spread across the country, which gives us kind of a good breadth of the country where we are focused. And this is just an overview of our development process to kind of give everyone a sense of a project lifecycle from inception through construction and in operation. So far on the left-hand side, we have economic and legislative analysis. We have a strong policy team whose job it is to pay attention to upcoming state legislation that develop community solar markets. Relevant to Virginia, of course, is the shared solar law that was passed last year, which we'll talk more about in a little bit. Once a market is created and legislation has been passed to create a community solar program, we have a real estate team that performs diligence to identify sites that make sense to support community solar. We'll get into this later in the presentation, but one thing that's nice about community solar is that it's substantially smaller than utility scale solar and other types of projects that the commission might be more familiar with. So it allows us to be very picky in how we identify sites and only finding the sites that meet specifically the right criteria where a project can be developed in a way that doesn't impact environmental or natural resources and makes sense for the overall character of the community. And then from there, once we've identified those sites, we go into contracting with our landowners. As the chair mentioned, this project in particular, we're leasing the land from the landowner that would host our project as opposed to a purchase of the parcel. Once that option to lease agreement is executed with our landowner, we move into project development, which is where we are currently here today, where we go through the engineering of the project, all environmental surveys, site surveys, coordination with Dominion Energy to make sure a project can be properly interconnected to their existing grid. And of course, permitting, making sure that our project is designed in a way to comply with the local ordinances and in a way that makes sense within the larger community. Once project development is complete and permits are in hand, we go into financing, where we partner with development partners, tax equity partners to finance the project before we move into construction and ultimately operations and maintenance of the system, where the system is up and running, generating electrons to the grid and benefiting customers. So as you can see here, we're right in the middle of the process. We've done a lot of work to date in making sure that this is a site that makes sense and is designed properly. And very interested to hear the feedback from the commission tonight. And so now this all begs the question, what is community solar, and why is it happening in Virginia? And the answer to that starts with legislation. So as I mentioned, last year, state legislation was passed by the state of Virginia Senate and House of Delegates called the Shared Solar Law. It was passed in April of last year. And essentially what this does is it creates a program for a community solar market where within Dominion's territory, the state has created a program to foster 200 megawatts of community solar projects, each project having a maximum capacity of only 5 megawatts AC. So in other words, it creates a program for around 40 projects in this phase of the legislation. And the way these community solar projects function are to allow customers to subscribe to the project to receive credits for the power produced by the solar facility to save money on their electric bill month over month from Dominion. And the way I like to describe this is actually more similar to residential PV, rooftop solar that you might get on your house, because it functions very similarly commercially. So if anybody has solar panels on their rooftop or knows anyone who does, you know that very rarely do residents buy the panels outright because it's a very expensive upfront cost. And instead what they do is work with a solar company to execute what's called a power purchase agreement, where essentially the solar developer puts panels on your roof, they maintain ownership of the equipment, and then they sell you the power produced by the system back to you as the homeowner at a rate that is less than what you would otherwise be paying Dominion. So you save money on your electric bill. The way I like to explain community solar is picturing an entire neighborhood where every home has solar panels on their roofs, and then just kind of aggregating them into one system. So it's one system containing all of these solar panels, but the offtake is still residential customers who can subscribe to the project. And while the actual electricity produced by the system doesn't flow into your home, it's just connected to Dominion's grid, those subscribers essentially have a share of the power produced by the system. And those shares of solar credits offset their Dominion bill in order to save money on their monthly electric bill. And we think this is advantageous to traditional rooftop solar because you can reach a much wider group of people than you can with traditional rooftop solar. Rooftop solar has lots of limitations, both on the constraints of the actual roof and space, and on who can actually benefit from a subscription. So for example, with rooftop solar, typically you need to own your home and have access to your roof. So if you're renting your home or if you live in an apartment, you don't have access to your roof, that eliminates you from receiving the benefit of community solar or of residential solar. And then beyond that, the solar company will come out and they'll look at your roof, and your home needs to meet certain criteria. Your roof has to be facing the right direction. It needs to be it needs to be relatively new because you don't want to have to change your roof midway through the solar being on your residence. And then you can't have anything shading out the roof. So you have a nice oak tree that's in your front yard and it provides nice shade to your lawn, but also casts a shadow on your roof. It wouldn't make sense to put solar on your roof. Community solar, none of these site-specific constraints really matter because the equipment isn't on your property. It's essentially virtually metered back to you through this crediting system. And then finally, with traditional rooftop solar, typically solar companies who focus on that kind of development, they maintain a minimum credit score that residents need to maintain because they're leasing and putting equipment on your roof. Community solar, that doesn't matter because there's no equipment on your roof. So community solar has no minimum credit score that a subscriber needs to have in order to benefit from the system. And further, under the legislation, the state's requiring that 30% of offtake from these systems be dedicated to low-income customers. So we think this is really great because it breaks down lots of the barriers that would prohibit this benefit from the people who benefit most. So we think this creates a really great opportunity for all kinds of residents to save money month over month on their electric bill with very flexible terms. There's no cost to sign up. The community solar program is 25 years in total, but you pay month to month. You could drop at any time without penalty. So we think this is a really great program that'll benefit the community. And so when we talk about community solar, inevitably we need to talk about utility solar, because this is a class of project that I think the state's more familiar with. It's been around in the state longer. There have been some projects that have been developed. And just to be frank, projects that I think have put a bad taste in people's mouths based on the amount of land it takes up, the amount of tree clearing, how it takes over, entire neighborhoods. So I think it's really important to differentiate community solar from utility scale solar, since they're really two very different classes of projects that are different in every way, except for perhaps the type of solar panel that's used. So looking at this table here, the most important thing to highlight up front is, of course, the size of the systems. So looking at the utility scale solar projects that have been proposed in the area, you'll see projects that are 20 megawatts, 60 megawatts, even 100 megawatts in size. And with that comes a lot of acres of land, 300, 500 acres of land of solar panels, which is a lot. That's jarring. So again, under the shared solar program, projects are capped at 5 megawatts AC. So substantially smaller, 20 times smaller than a 100 megawatt utility scale project. And with a smaller project capacity, there's a smaller footprint. So a 5 megawatt system would typically take up around 25 acres of land as opposed to 500. And that's beneficial because it allows developers, as I mentioned before, to be really careful at how they're siting a project, finding a piece of land, and micro-siting and designing the project within the parcel to make sure it's designed in a way that makes sense, in a way that is properly screened from view, away from neighbors, in a way that's not going to impact the character of the community. And then lastly, as I mentioned, offtake is very different. With the utility scale project, the power that's generated is just sold back to Dominion at wholesale rates, no different than a coal plant or a natural gas plant or a wind turbine. And so the benefits aren't really realized by the community and the residents. Community solar is obviously very different because, as I mentioned, the offtake is directly residential customers who will receive these savings on their electric bill. So it's very different in how these are sited, how they're designed, and who benefits from these projects that are within our communities. So that brings us to our project here. So as Robert mentioned, we are proposing a 5.1 megawatt DC, 4 megawatt AC solar project on a property at 14100 Thomas Jefferson Highway. And I'm going to break from the PowerPoint to shift over to Google Earth because I think it's important to kind of get our bearings on where this property is and what's surrounding the area. So if you could see my Google Earth, you could see the larger property here. The landowner currently owns a property that's around 87 acres in size. As it was mentioned in the summary of the project, the property is a mix of forest and cleared agriculture. Currently, the landowner is using the cleared meadow space to raise sheep, livestock, and our lease area of that 87 acres is around 20 acres, and it's mostly located within the already cleared area of the project site. It's in the southwest corner of the county. It's around 2 miles south of the town of Pamplin. And as Robert mentioned before, one thing that we really liked about the site, and one of the things that we think really makes sense about a project in this location, is that it's not going to impact the overall development and character of the community. The residential homes in the area are very sparse and set far apart, so it's not a very residentially dense area. It's zoned agriculture. We have the Norfolk Southern right-of-way that runs to the west of our project. So while I understand that the property borders Thomas Jefferson Highway indirectly, and that there's no other parcel in between, this rail right-of-way provides a very good buffer to offset the project back from the highway, which is of course it's important because the highway is a scenic byway, and we want to make sure those view sheds are not impacted by the project. And the way it's currently designed, it will not. Other things to call out here, obviously, there's a lot of forested area, both within the property itself as well as in the surrounding properties. And this is great in that it allows us to utilize the majority cleared area while using the existing vegetative buffer to screen the project from view. And then further, obviously we have no control on the vegetative cover for the surrounding properties, but it's great that these are currently in place to screen the project from view for other neighboring properties. So we think this is great because it's the proper size that can host a facility and one that can be designed without impacting the larger community. All right, and then going back to the PowerPoint here, just some other things to note. We would be accessing the site off of the existing driveway that the landowners currently use on site, which would be upgrading for a facility, a standard gravel road, and we'd be co-locating our interconnection with that access road. So as I mentioned, the project would be interconnected into Dominion's local grid. And Dominion's currently performing the interconnection study on our project to make sure any potential upgrades are identified through the study. So far, all signs have been positive. So we feel really good about this site. And I think that's everything on this slide. And now this is just a high level slide to show how we are compliant with Prince Edward County's zoning code for solar energy systems. As I mentioned, the site is zoned agriculture, so we're in the proper zoning district. Our setbacks are compliant with what is currently listed in the ordinance, and in many areas we exceed those required setbacks. So as you see here, the setback from buildings and public rights of way like Thomas Jefferson Highway is around 75 feet. We not only meet that, we are more than what is minimally required. So remember, we have this Norfolk Southern right of way between our property and Thomas Jefferson Highway. So while the setback from the rail right of way might be that standard 50 feet, which is what would be required under adjoining properties, because that right of way is around 100 feet wide and maybe a little bit more, our setback from Thomas Jefferson Highway, the scenic byway, is actually 170 feet. So we're able to utilize the existing right of way in addition to the setbacks we're currently maintaining to maximize the distance between us and Thomas Jefferson Highway, which is great. And then on the other sides of the property, we're minimally maintaining 50 on that eastern side. In many areas, we're over 100 feet. And then because the landowner is retaining the rest of the parcel to the north and south, our distance from neighboring properties are even further. So the nearest non-landlord owned property to the north is around 600 feet away, and then to the south, 800 feet away. So we've designed this project in a way to be far away from neighbors, and in a way where the project is out of sight. And then again, great visual screening here, both within the surrounding properties and of course the Norfolk Southern right of way, which I understand we have no control over, but it's great that it's currently in place. The landowner along that right, some of their own vegetative screening, which is currently there, which will screen the project from view. And one thing that I think is important to talk about is Norfolk Southern's right of way not only has this strong vegetative buffer, but the way the rail is built, in many areas, there's also a very tall berm, which varies in height from 6 feet to in some areas 8 to 9 feet tall. So even if that vegetation wasn't there, the topography alone for someone driving down Thomas Jefferson Highway would not be able to see over the berm, and there's no way they'd be able to see the project 170 feet from the road. So we think this really works to our advantage, and certainly where the vegetation on the landowner side of the parcel is perhaps a little sparse and insufficient, we are proposing to add new proposed evergreen landscaping buffer to supplement that, to bolster the overall vegetative screening of the area, to make sure we obscure the project from view as much as possible. And so, in closing here, I think to really kind of, hit the nail on the head on this issue, what we did here is we provided a view shed map and a series of photos where I walked down Thomas Jefferson Highway, and you could see, what are the existing conditions on site and how, the project will benefit from the existing conditions along the highway, not only within the right of way, but also on the landowner's property. So you can see here, this first point is from essentially the southern portion of the landowner's property at our site access. You can see here right off the bat, the existing vegetative buffer is a mature tree stand. It's a mix of hardwood and evergreen trees, very tall in height, which will, be really great in screening this project from view. You can see here that, even from this location, we are several hundred feet from the first panel, but we still think, this is a benefit to highlight. And from here, we're just going to be simply walking north on Thomas Jefferson Highway down the road. So this is the second view. Again, you can see the existing vegetative buffer, not only within the right of way, but also the landowner's property. But then again, I think it's important to highlight this existing berm here. It's hard to tell, without context, but that's probably 8 or 9 feet tall. So if you're in your car and you're driving on the highway and you're looking to your right or left, depending on what direction you're seeing, even without those trees, that berm being in place prevents anyone from seeing over the rail line and into the property. So we think that alone is a great advantage and something that really was appealing to us as we were looking at the site as a way of screening the project from view. Okay, this is our third photo point. This is kind of midway up the project on Thomas Jefferson Highway. We can see here, there is a mature tree stand. I included this intentionally because I would say this is the area where the tree stand is probably the most sparse. So this is a great opportunity where we would look at what is on our side of the property and add new proposed landscaping to kind of enhance this wall of trees separating the project from the highway. And then again, continuing north, you could see here lots of trees in the foreground along the right of way, but then also lots of vegetation in the back screening the project from view. You can see here outside of the right of way, there are substantial trees on the landowner's property, which will remain in place for the project. And then finally, this is from the far northern point of the project. This is the nearest residential property. We actually spoke with this gentleman at our community meeting, as well as the resident who lives on the eastern side of the property. And they agreed that due to all of the tree screening, they have no concerns about the project. They're confident that they will not be affected by its development. So that was really great feedback to hear. We were really pleased to see that. And one thing to highlight, of course, from this residential property, he's not across from our project. We are not developing this far northern portion. Those trees would stay in place. So essentially, he's just looking at a wall of trees with the first panel probably being 300 feet to the southeast of the project. So again, the existing plus proposed screening is going to do a great job in hiding this project from view. And again, I included these landscaping exhibits as examples to show, in those areas where we feel the existing landscape buffer on the property is perhaps, a little bit more sparse. These are areas that we can identify to bolster with new trees. So Daniel Langston, who is our landscape architect, did a great job in putting together these exhibits to show how and where we think it makes sense to add new trees. So again, this is far south of our project fence line on the southern side of the landowner's property. You can see here kind of the background. This is the site entrance, the access road onto the site. You can see there's a little gap here in the tree line. Of course, our project, our fence line is probably hundreds of feet from this entranceway, but still this is a good opportunity to plant new trees off the driveway that will mature and grow after a couple of seasons, because we use, again, a mix of hardwood and evergreen trees that, grow quickly in height over a couple of seasons. That will just enhance that buffer. And then again, this is that photo I pointed out before. This is the third vantage point as we were walking down the street there, the area where vegetation is the most sparse. You could see some sky here in the background of the existing conditions. And then in the second photo where we're showing the type of additional plantings we would propose to plant here, we're really thickening up the existing tree line so that even here where, the berm is a little bit lower, still probably, 4 feet high, this additional plantings will screen the project from view. While we're here, just really quickly, Daniel, did you have anything else you wanted to highlight about our proposed landscaping on the project?
Nothing else to highlight other than just to let the commission members know that when you took these photos, it was early spring. So think about some of the existing vegetation that you're seeing here. It hasn't fully come in yet. So it's kind of in between when we have these hardwoods that are leaf bare in the winter, but it's not full leaf yet. So that's something else to consider. So, that photo that you're seeing on the left, it would thicken up a little bit more in the summertime, but obviously those species that we would pick, as Kieran mentioned, would be fast growing type species that would grow in quickly, and spacing them properly so that they do that as well.
Thank you, Daniel. That's a great point. Thanks for highlighting that. So that's our project in a nutshell. Really appreciate all of you taking the time. Just kind of in summary, we think this site makes sense for community solar. We think community solar is great for Prince Edward County, not only for the residents who would take advantage of the savings on their electric bill, to the county who would realize increased real estate tax revenue from the project. And finally, for all of us at large, fostering the proliferation of new renewable energy in the state. So with that, I am happy to kind of open the floor if there are any questions from the commission or any comments from the public. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that presentation. Do anybody has any questions for him?
Yeah, I do on the tax revenue. It looks like the county really is not gonna get a whole lot. That land was assessed at $2,000 an acre.
I didn't pull that information.
Oh,
I didn't, yeah,
Okay.
I think that is correct.
that is correct.
I think, yeah.
Okay.
The current, yes.
Surprised. I have some landlocked land that's appraised at 2,000 an acre, and this is on a major highway. But anyhow, that's, but basically, it looks like it'd be very little tax revenue for the county. I see you saying here that the state and local taxes will be $84,673 a year, where the county only gets $1,753 a year out of this. So it doesn't seem to be generating much for our county, by any means.
Sure. I appreciate the question. And on the line with us today, we have Fletcher Mangum from Mangum Economics. Fletcher actually performed a fiscal and economic analysis on this project and the revenues that be realized by the county. So Fletcher, do you want to take it away?
Sure, absolutely. The increased revenue is from, or entirely from, increased assessments of the property. Our experience in other localities across Virginia, at this point, we've done 39 solar projects across 7 states. Most of those have been in Virginia, is that the property is typically reassessed at a level between 10 and in some cases even as high as $17,000 per acre. The current assessment, average assessment on this site is 1,900 and change. So on the 20 acres or so that would be within the fence line, that is where that increased revenue comes from over the period of time. Moving from a 1,900 per acre assessment to in the neighborhood of 10,000. But again, it only affects those 20 acres. So that is why you're seeing, a doubling of the tax revenue from what is currently provided. But again, the tax revenue just pertains to those 20 acres that would be reassessed for solar use.
Oh, you got that tax rate from our county records then at $1,900 an acre?
That is correct.
Okay. All right, so the state would, I guess through taxes on y'all's electrical transmissions would get $83,000 roughly.
I'm not sure where that figure comes from.
It comes from page
During-
6, I think, of your, sorry, yeah, here we go.
Yeah, that
Page 6.
those numbers are from
State and local tax revenue, $84,673.
right. That's an estimate of the tax revenue that will be generated during the construction. This is a $6.9 million investment. When we look at the construction numbers, which are what that economic and fiscal impact is on page 6, overall construction would generate 23 job years as direct and indirect labor income over the period of construction of approximately $947,000 and $2.9 million in overall economic output. It's that $2.9 million in overall economic impact or output that is driving that $84,700 in tax revenue. So that is a one-time tax benefit, state and local, associated with the construction.
As far as building permits and things like that, is that where, or how would we as a county receive a portion of that $84,000?
When we look at the operating revenue, we do a very detailed estimate that's very specific to the project and to the locality. With the construction estimate, it's a little bit more difficult because what we're trying to assess is particularly, I mean, think of sales tax revenue. How much of that, of those inputs are going to be purchased from the locality itself? So there we use a more generic estimate that's provided by the in-plan model, which looks at combined state and local revenue. But your portion of that would be sales tax revenue from purchases on the site or within the county and a host of other things. But again, that is pooled, and there's no way for us actually to tease that out.
Thanks, Fletcher. And I think something that's really important to highlight, with regard to the reoccurring real estate tax revenue over the lifetime of the project, is that this is additional revenue realized by the county without any additional costs. So, right, so when we look at other types of developments like residential subdivisions, new traditional commercial development, perhaps there's an increase in real estate tax, but there's also a strain on county services because you need to worry about new traffic, water, sewer, in many cases, new school-aged children, all which cost the county. We think that this is a great generator for the county in that there'll be a realize of increased real estate tax revenue with no cost because this project doesn't generate traffic during operation. Obviously, it's not manned during the operation, so there's no new school-aged children, which would cost the county. There's no waste pickup. There's no water service. So we think this is very nice. I guess we call it passive tax income for the county, where it's above and beyond current use for agriculture at no impact to county services.
If the special use permit is passed, when do y'all hope to start construction?
Sure. So we would expect to start construction in 2020, maybe late 2021, early 2022.
And how long will the construction be approximately, roughly?
It's relatively short for a project this size, probably around six-ish months. And that's divided between traditional civil and site work where we're installing the racking and the access road, and then kind of the back half of that is simply just wiring the panels,
Okay.
Wiring the inverters.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
Well, that's Rob, but part, if bonding, the decommission of this
Yes,
project.
that is a requirement of the ordinance.
Was that in, I didn't see it in your.
They have a
Required it in the ordinance.
They have a decommissioning plan.
Right, okay,
Yes.
yeah, right, okay, I got you. Yeah, we did include that now in our.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And additionally, any stormwater bonding for the construction would be also bonded as well, if required.
Okay, okay.
Okay. Before we close the public hearing part on this, let me read the potential conditions for the record that the staff has put together. Of course, we can change those or add to them as you see fit. But let me read those real quick, please, to get them on the record. Development activities on the site shall be limited to those as specified in special use permit application and site plan. The final locations of incidental facilities may be adjusted provided no such adjustment violates any buffers, setbacks, or other statutory requirement. The concepts reflected in the filed special use permit dated 3/24/2021 are hereby made part of these development conditions. Final site approval for the community solar energy facility shall be submitted to the Prince Edward County Planning Commission for final review and approval pursuant to Article 7, Alternating Energy Facilities, Section 53-157B of the Prince Edward County Code or zoning ordinance. Any proposed expansion of the operation, change of activities, or additional facilities or activities shall be submitted to the Prince Edward County Planning and Community Development Office for review prior to implementation. Any changes may be subject to permit amendment procedures, including public hearings. Now, the setbacks, they've got blankets currently 50 feet with 15 feet, which we can discuss if we need, if you feel like we need to increase it in this instance, of existing natural buffer and newly installed landscaping buffer shall be provided. Project area shall be seeded with native grasses and wildflower mix. All landscaping shall be mulched and maintained to the reasonable satisfaction of the Prince Edward County Planning and Community Development Director. Any vegetation found to be of poor condition shall be replaced or improved at the reasonable direction of the Planning and Community Development Director or his designee. All pollution control measures, erosion and sediment control measures, stormwater control facilities, and all construction activities shall comply with the requirements of the appropriate federal, state, and local regulations and ordinances. Any development activities of structural land disturbing nature not specifically addressed by these conditions shall be in conformance with applicable provisions of federal, state, and local statutes and regulations. All entrance permits must be authorized by Virginia Department of Transportation. All internal roads used for public access shall be of compacted earth or have a minimum of a 4-inch stone base or shall be paved. All exterior lighting shall be designed and installed so as to minimize glare onto adjoining properties or any public access road. All lighting shall be full cutoff type fixtures. The permittee is responsible for the appearance of the site, including litter pickup and orderly site appearance. At the end of the useful life of the project, the property shall be restored to the same conditions as existed prior to the project and as outlined in the decommissioning plan. This permit is non-transferable except and unless written notice from the permittee regarding the transfer and a signed document from the proposed new permittee is received by the Planning and Community Development Office, which states that the new permittee agrees to comply with all terms and conditions imposed with the original permit issuance. If the proposed new permittee desires to amend the original permit conditions, amendments must be addressed by the Prince Edward County Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors through the special use permit process. Failure of permittee to full conform to all terms and conditions may result in revocation of the special use permit if said failure or failures are not corrected or addressed to the satisfaction not to be unreasonably withheld of the county within 30 days of written notice from the county. So, are there anything, conditions you want to add, or we need to talk about the setback? Do we want to just leave it the way with the 50 feet and 15 feet of buffer, or what's your desire on that?
Well, with the railroad, it seemed like there should be sufficient amount of setback. My only concern is when they said, the tree line, how this was in spring and they weren't fully leafed out. But what about in the winter when there are no leaves? What kind of
That's true.
Well, they're
plan
gonna
are they
put,
there?
on the other side of the railroad, I believe they're gonna put evergreens too, right?
That's correct.
Never.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can respond to that. I mean,
What's there, then another one that they'll put in, I believe, okay.
Okay.
I'm still disappointed with the tax revenue for the county. I did a little math real quick, and as it is now, that property's generating, I believe in math's right, roughly $960 an acre, a year in property taxes. And what they're doing is to increase that just $800. Now, I know this is a money-making project for this solar power company, and I really think Prince Edward County ought to get a little bit more out of it than that. If you value, now, they're only using 20 acres for the solar panels, yes. But the 93-acre area has got to be included in this, at least in the whole thing. Why can't that whole area be reassessed to 10,000 an acre and not just the 20 acres?
Utility scale is treated differently by the Code of Virginia. These smaller facilities, the commission revenue hands are going to be tied as far as what they can do and what they can't do. We can have them look at it, but
Well, I
We
mean,
raised
seriously,
that question the last time.
this company's gonna make good money off this electric transmission, and for our county just to gain $800 for it. You know, I know they said they will have 23 people come into work, more than likely all those people will not be residents of our county. They will come here. They might buy some materials, concrete will be the main material, but I expect most of the stuff will come in here prefab for that specific project. And, you know, I mean, I'm not against solar power at all, I think it's a great thing. But then again, I'm looking out for our county too, as far as revenues that, from projects like this that should also help offset some of our local pressure on taxes.
Sure, I can understand that. I would just, reiterate that this is, additional income with no additional strain on town services, and then not to mention,
I do the same thing. I have a farm, and I preach that all the time on my farmland. It doesn't take a thing out of the county to do it, but I still have to pay right good taxes on it, so. And you can generate a whole lot more off that electric project than I am off my farm. Sorry to cut you, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, that's okay. The only other thing I was going to say is, of course, there's the indirect benefit of people who are saving money on their electric bill that have more income to spend, elsewhere, which contributes to sales tax and other local taxes. And I think that's, that economic pulse that Fletcher was getting at in his description of the analysis.
How many people in the community do you think will benefit from this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a project of this size, we believe, can produce power equivalent to around 800 homes.
Okay. Okay, well, we need to, are there any more questions for them? We need to decide about, on the conditions, if we're gonna move forward with this. And do we want to leave the setbacks as currently in the code, or did you want to add to them, or?
I think there's sufficient.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so also.
Yeah. Do we don't need a motion on that since it's already in.
No, it's just discussion. You can add it, you can just note that the 50 and 15 have been added.
Okay. Well, if there's no more questions, we don't have anybody on the phone, and we didn't have anybody on the phone for the review either. So I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing part of the meeting for this issue, for this permit. And if there's any discussion, any more questions that members of the commission would have?
I think you've got a staff comment.
Mr. Chair, I just want to
Yes,
address Commissioner Jones's comment about the revenue. The Code of Virginia was modified a few years ago to allow for what they call revenue share for solar energy projects. And under the code section, any locality may by ordinance assess a revenue share up to $1,400 per megawatt. And that was instituted when they worked with the solar companies to try to give additional revenue to localities. The problem is it exempts anything under 20 megawatts, which this one would fall under.
Yeah.
So there is in the larger facilities a significant amount of revenue that could be different. You know, 100 megawatt facility, 140 grand a year, significant amount of revenue. For these smaller scale facilities, the Code of Virginia does not give us that ability to go after that revenue share. So I just wanted to answer your question there. That would have made a big difference.
Yes, it would.
Any more discussion or questions? Okay. Do I hear a motion for approval of the special use permit by Prince Edward CSG LLC for the community solar facility with the conditions as discussed?
I motion to approve.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So passed.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
very much.
gentlemen, very much. We appreciate.
I appreciate your time. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Hopefully we can be in person soon.
Okay.
Everybody take care.
Okay. Okay. Next, on the agenda is review of supervisor's actions.
Yes, sir. The fee schedule, as y'all recommended, was passed. I do want to make one notice. There was one required change. Our subdivision ordinance has in its code, in the county code, a maximum of $175 review fee for subdivisions with $5, $10 a lot for any lot over five lots. So we did have a major and a minor subdivision fee schedule difference in there temporarily right now until we look at the subdivision code as a whole. We're not able to change that. So that one fee will stay the same as it's always been. We will, with you all, be looking at some subdivision and zoning regulation changes going forward, and we'll have another chance to address that.
Okay.
But and in the future, I would recommend we would change that language to reference a fee schedule as adopted by the board from time to time. We'll, you know, that way we won't quantify a single number in the code and lock ourselves in again. So we'll be able to address that in the future. But the other fees are in place, and the board recommended that they take place on July 1st, which coincides with our fiscal year, and we are going to be letting all the folks know that that's coming, so no one is surprised by that new change. That will generate some cost recovery. It's not really revenue because we're putting out services, but it does help offset some of our cost of doing business. Under old business, I don't have anything, and I don't have anything under new business.
I mean, nobody on the commission has any new business, do you? Or Doug, you don't have anything either, I guess. Okay. Our next meeting is scheduled to be on May 18th at 7 p.m. If there's no further business, we'll adjourn the meeting. Have a good evening.